Pollinators across the board have suffered from industrialization, urbanization, disruption of habitats, introduction of invasive species. They're experiencing death by 1,000 cuts.
Bees and butterflies don't usually make the headlines, but scientists warn that the steady decline in bees and other pollinators could trigger a crisis bigger and more immediate than global warming.
3/4 of all plants on the planet depend on animals for pollination. They can't reproduce sexually without this animal partnership. So if you look out the window and eliminate 3/4 of what you see, that's a reason to worry.
As the supply of pollinators keeps dwindling, agriculture pushes for ever bigger harvests. 3 years ago, bee numbers in the U.S. had already fallen so low that for the first time in 80 years, bees had to be imported from abroad. Government officials turned to Australia, where a lucrative bee export industry now regularly ships to the U.S. With the onset of colony collapse disorder, beekeepers desperately rebuild their empty hives with Australian bees. It's a quick fix, but only adds to the cost of the losses.
These losses this year translates into about $450,000 cost to put bees back in the boxes, lost pollination contracts because we're short on bees, lost honey crops. I mean, there's no way that we're going to get back in the black this year, and you know, we can't take another hit like this.
Beekeepers facing bankruptcy. Farms without food. Desperate beekeepers turn to scientists to solve the mystery of colony collapse disorder before another round of bee losses throws agriculture into a tailspin.
Good evening. Welcome to the 2015 edition of One Book, One Community. I am Jeffrey Tooker, Deputy Superintendent of the Placer Union High School District. The goals of One Book, One Community are modest: to promote literacy, to engage our local community members, teenagers to adults, in discussions about books and their content. Books selected are connected to our area and issues of local importance. In the years to come, we hope to continue to feature books on our area's history, books that offer a perspective of our local economy or interesting social issues, and books that provide insight into our community and its connection to the larger world. 2013's read was Jordan Fisher Smith's Nature Noir, true stories set in the Sierra Nevadas, specifically Our American River Canyon. 2014 selection was Jennifer Woodleaf's A Wall of White, which documents the 1982 avalanche disaster at Alpine Meadows. If you have suggestions for future reads, please send us your ideas. We have a website, www.auburnoboc.org, or contact one of our two co-chairs of One Book, One Community, Bart O'Brien or Steve Grunmeyer. Tonight's event, the third of four, is the panel discussion of The Beekeeper's Lament by Hannah Nordhaus. One Book, One Community is sponsored by the Placer Union High School District, the Placer County Office of Education, the Auburn Rotary Club, and the Auburn Placer County Library. Our steering committee is small and mighty. Thank you to our local artist, Paula Amory. Paula, are you here this evening? Paula Amory for painting a beautiful original piece used in our marketing. And thank you to Placer High School for hosting us. Auditorium technician Dave King, his student assistant Josh Bingham. Thank you. Our first event was 2 weeks ago at a full house at the State Theater, showing the documentary film More Than Honey. Our second event was last week. A sold-out beekeepers dinner was held at the Blue Goose Fruit Shed in Loomis. And a week from tonight, in this auditorium, will be the final event, an evening with the author Hannah Nordhaus, interviewed by Beth Ruyak, and I believe Hannah will be interviewed that day on Beth's program Insight on Capital Public Radio. The popularity of One Book, One Community continues to grow, and we appreciate your support in this culturally enriching endeavor. Many of you also probably just attended the Auburn Art Walk. Tonight's format is a panel discussion around the topics found in the book, A Beekeeper's Lament. Let me please introduce the distinguished members of tonight's panel. Randy Oliver. Randy, come on up. Randy Oliver. Randy owns and operates a small commercial beekeeping enterprise in the foothills of Grass Valley. He and his two sons manage about 1,000 colonies for migratory pollination and produce queens, nucleus colonies, and honey. He has over 40 years of practical beekeeping experience, plus holds a BS and MS degrees in biological sciences. Randy's researches, analyzes, and digests beekeeping information from all over the world in order to not only broaden his own depth of understanding and knowledge, but to develop practical solutions to many of today's beekeeping problems, which he then shares with other beekeepers through his various articles in bee magazines, speaking engagements worldwide, and on his website, www.scientificbeekeeping.com. Randy Oliver shares his knowledge of bee biology, colony health issues, and practical beekeeping management. Elina Nino. Honeybee scientist Elina Nino is known for her expertise on honeybee queen biology, chemical ecology, and genomics. She is an extension apiculturist at the University of California, Davis, the Department of Entomology and Nematology. Dr. Nino holds a postdoctoral fellowship funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Dr. Nino conducts problem-solving research focused on honeybees and those crops in need of pollination services. She provides outreach to backyard beekeepers that represent a growing enterprise in California. Dr. Nino is internationally recognized for her work on queen biology and has collaborated broadly with several key honeybee researchers in the United States, Israel, Europe, and Australia. Dr. Nino has received several high honors and awards, far too many to enumerate here. So thank you for being here tonight. And John Miller. John is currently the president of the California State Beekeepers Association. John is a fourth-generation beekeeper. He has kept bees for 36 years. John owns Miller's Honey Farms Incorporated, based in Blackfoot, Idaho, with branches in Gackle, North Dakota, and Newcastle, California. His son, Jason, is also in the business. Miller Honey was founded in 1894 by N.E. Miller, the father of migratory beekeeping. Miller Honey Farms keeps bees in several western states, providing crop pollination services and honey production. He also owns Miller Honey Mandarins of Newcastle. John is a former two-term chair of the National Honey Board, and as the subject of the Beekeeper's Lament, John epitomizes the American migratory beekeeper and how one man and 500 million honeybees help feed a nation. John is married to Professor Jan Miller, microbiology, American River College. They have 4 children and 7 grandchildren. May we give all of our panelists a warm welcome. And tonight's moderator is Rick Brown. Rick is currently an adjunct instructor at Sarah College, teaching both documentary photography and cityscape workshops. Additionally, he and his wife Jackie own and operate Meta Vista Flower and Berry Farm in their hometown. He is currently completing the training to become a UC Davis Extension Master Gardener. In a previous life, he worked as an English journalism teacher at Colfax High School. He also completed a stint as a curriculum coordinator, a grant writer, and an instructional mentor. Mr. Brown is a former Placer County Teacher of the Year and an Auburn Chamber of Commerce Educator of the Year. Before his tenure as an educator, he worked at KQED in San Francisco and as news director for KUKI in Ukiah. His photography and writing have appeared in the Crocker Museum, Sacramento News and Review, and Scholastic Journalism journals. Thank you for attending, and please enjoy this evening. Rick Brown.
Well, good evening. This is going to be a great evening. It's going to last about an hour and a half. It's going to be a lot of fun and very informative. Before we get started, there's a few things to be concerned about. And first is, if you have a question or comment, we're going to try an approach that's used by the San Francisco Commonwealth Club, where two highly paid individuals named Steve Grunmeyer and Bart O'Brien will be passing out cards. I think I see them lurking in the shadows in the back. And if you would like to participate with a question or a comment, feel free to grab a card, and in about 20 minutes they'll come around, or pass them to the side, and they'll pick them up and they'll put them in different categories, and then they'll present those to me about halfway through the conversation, and we'll use your questions and comments for a response from our one distinguished panel. So, and before beginning tonight, I would like to acknowledge John Miller's dedication to this discussion by appearing on the panel despite dealing with a horrific accident. John has also appeared at last week's movie and Saturday's dinner. And additionally, we'd like to thank Dr. Elina Nino and Randy Oliver for the time they share with their incredible expertise in tonight's exchange. John, would you mind giving us a prognosis of your injury? I'm sure many members of our audience don't really know what happened.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I can report that gravity is robust. If you just casually step into space off the edge of the stage here, the result will be painful and immediate. Thank you. March 16th, I just stepped into space and landed, and I landed in the arms of an orthopedist named Ryder at Kaiser, and he bolted me back together, and I saw him today, and I'm appreciative to him. I just stepped into thin space and fractured, broke the top off of my femur, and it went up into my pelvis. And my son can attest to my capability with cowboy words. But if I follow directions, I'm going to be fine. Thank you.
Good to have you here. We'd also like to note that our audience includes those well-versed in many of the issues associated with the colony collapse disorder, as well as the efforts to revitalize the bee population. We welcome those folks also who are relatively new to the topic and hope to achieve an overview of the subject through tonight's discussion. And our first question is addressed to all of our panelists. And I'd like to note that I've been getting to know you through Hannah Norhouse's book and your many blogs and publications. I've been able to spend a couple weeks really getting to know you. And I've reached a conclusion. Each one of you has a unique relationship to the honeybee. A relationship that denotes passion, utilization, fascination, admiration, among many other emotions. Can we start out this conversation by discussing your individual relationship with the European honeybee? We'll start with Elina, please.
Thank you, Rick. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Ron and Bart, for inviting me. I would just like to point out that it was kind of odd that the only picture in there was me without the bee suit on, or not working the bees. That doesn't mean that I'm not with the bees ever. It just happened to be a nice photo, so why not? But I do work a lot with the bees in the hives direct, and I think that's really important to be able to, to be able to connect with the beekeepers, right? And Rick, when I first came here, he asked me how did I get started with the bees, and I wish I could tell you I love bees since I was a little girl, or I've had families that were in beekeeping for generations, but it was really an accident, lucky accident. I would say, and I actually worked on dung beetles before I started working with honeybees, so it was definitely a big switch. But it was just a young entomologist, new professor at the NC State Entomology Department, who invited me to her lab meeting one day, and she was working on using genomics to understand what is driving the bee behavior. So she invited me to the lab meeting, and really that was it. I knew I wanted to work with the honeybees. There's always something new to learn. A lot of people will say they don't read the books, right? The honeybees don't read a book. And I just heard a new one, honeybees will make a liar out of you. Yes, they do. They often make a liar out of me. But that's what's so interesting and fun about working with the bees. There's always something new you can learn. They always surprise you. So I really enjoy doing research, and I really enjoy extending my knowledge to the beekeepers, or even those who are just sort of curious about bees, but not sure if they want to get into beekeeping. So I'm really glad to be in this position as an extension specialist. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy, would you mind relating your relationship with the honeybee?
You know, I haven't been asked that question before, but while Elina was speaking, and let me relate an anecdote. Several years ago, my younger son, who had been keeping bees with me for a few years, it was a beautiful spring day out in an orchard, and we were going through the colonies, and he says, "Dad, I gotta tell you something that's kind of strange." He says, "On a day like this, when we're in the bees, I get high. I feel high." He says, I know that sounds really weird, but I can't explain it, but it's just the energy, I get high. And I just stopped and put down the smoker and went over there, and I gave him a big hug. I said, "Ian, you've just become a beekeeper." Because on a day like this, the energy of the hives, if you are a beekeeper, you are just as high as a kite, because the bees are as high as a kite, because it's just so incredible. Everything's going right for them. To me, I've always been into biology and nature, and the honeybees have given me a challenge to use my mind. I was speaking to the world's largest beekeeper, Richard Ph.D., a number of years ago, and he said, "Randy, you know what I love about beekeeping?" He says, "You know that you're going to die with more questions than you started with." That's a fascinating thing about bees.
Thank you. And John, your relationship with the honeybee?
Well stated. I began with bees at 6, and I have always known I would be a bee guy. It was never a question while throwing freight at Albertsons or any of the other stumble blocks along life's path. I always knew I would be a bee guy. And I've always taken, like Randy, great pleasure from the keeping of bees. And that sounds odd because you're surrounded by stinging insects, and it's hot and it's sweaty, and it's one of the most exhilarating, fulfilling occupations I think anyone can ever have, blessed with a love for the bees. And I never tire of that. I never tire of the interest under what's under that next lid, what's in that next hive. And I just never tire of that, and I hope I never do, because it's always interesting.
It seems that all three of you are referring to what we might call the mystery of the experience, and that's part of the fascination. Am I reading that right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Elina, I'd like to follow up this question from your perspective. Would you be willing, and I know you're definitely able, to describe the annual life of a healthy hive? For example, the role of the queen, workers, and the drones, the seasonal process involved in a healthy hive. What would one see?
And so you want me to describe that in what, minute and a half? So I always, actually when you ask me that, it's funny because the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, are we talking about California or are we talking about Pennsylvania? Because that's where I moved from Pennsylvania, so it's slightly different than what you would see here in California. Let's talk about California. And of course, Randy and John will be much more able to, intercept if I say anything wrong, because they've been here for a long time. But let's say we're in the spring now. I'll talk about the experience that we just went through. None of us really wish to have to buy packaged bees all the time because we're losing them or we're don't have it. So let's just say we as a new lab, we've only been here for 8 months, we don't have any bees. So we purchase the packages, we install the packages into our hives, into our equipment. What we'll see and what we're hoping to see is for the queen to start egg laying as soon as she possibly can, producing new workforce, new workers. Of course, she will be producing drones as well that the other queens will mate with. And that is actually my topic of interest, is mating, honeybee queen mating and reproductive processes. And the mating process itself is very fascinating to me because, you know, it happens up in the air. It's sort of a mystery again. You can't really just throw a queen and a drone in a cage and say, you guys mate. It doesn't work that way. They have to have specific conditions. They gather up, the drones gather up, they sort of chase the queen around, they catch her, they mate with her, and then the poor guys die. So the only thing that the drones are sort of good for is mating, right? But that doesn't mean that they're not very, very important as well, because they do contribute to the genetic pool of the honeybees. Of course, we have the workers. Those are, again, fascinating creatures because they go through a process. When they first emerge as adults, they sort of hang out in the hive, they're helping the queen, they're feeding the queen, they start feeding the brood, they clean up the hive. So they hang out in the hive for about 3 weeks. After that, they become foragers. They go out, they forage, they get pollen and nectar, food for the hive, so they provide for it. That lasts about 6 weeks, and then the poor workers are gone. The queen is, I guess you could say, the lucky one. She sticks around probably the longest, although that is also sort of questionable now because I'm sure John and Randy will agree with me. The queen quality has been decreasing. So I used to have on one of my slides saying that the queen will last anywhere between 1 year and 5 years. I don't think that's really the case anymore. I think the queens are lasting much less time. So was that a minute and a half? There's plenty.
It's an excellent description, and
So I'll stop there.
you lead us in a very positive perspective, so which we appreciate. And I would like to address this question to both Randy and John, and that is that both of you, as you go about your business and raise honeybees for both honey and pollination, how likely are you to encounter a hive as Elena describes?
A hive failure or
No, the healthy one.
the healthy hive. We strive earnestly for healthy hives all the time. But the new normal of beekeeping, as she described queens in my grandfather's day, queens did last for 3 years. And in my father's day, queens did last for 2 years. And in my day, we're fortunate if we can get a full year, a productive year out of a queen. Part of it is the economics. We push our hives real hard. Commercial guys push their queens hard. But there is no question that scientists have documented a decline in productivity, in fertility, in longevity. There's lots of issues going on within the queen herself and within the drones and the seeds they place in the queen. And we really need people like those seated to my right to unlock these riddles. And I want to take a minute right here to share with the audience an observation that a fellow beekeeper of mine made the other day. He writes a journal and he's widely respected. His name is Joe Trainer. Joe Trainer brokers bees for almond growers. And he said something really interesting the other day about Randy. And Randy has kind of burst on the scene in the past 10 years as this fountain of ideas with lots of questions and practical application and practical solutions, and it's upended some of the conventional thinking. And what this wise tribal elder said just this week was, he said, Randy Oliver is probably the most observant and influential beekeeper since Lorenzo Langstroth. And I think this industry owes a great debt to specifically Randy Oliver and those of his ilk that question everything and try to apply practical applications to real world problems. And he's right here in Grass Valley, and he's a member of my home club, Nevada County Beekeepers Club. And I see a bunch of my club members here tonight. Back to the question Yes, we experience it firsthand, annually, repeatedly. It's
Would
frustrating.
it be fair to ask percentages?
Oh, sure.
So walking up to a yard, what percentage of your hives would be classified as healthy?
I'll pitch this to Randy in a hurry, but I'll say this. In our business, we can track the peak colony count from late in April. It's coming up soon. We hope to crack 16,000 hives before the end of April. And we will lose fully 1/3 of those, maybe 40% of those before we begin the pollination season next year. It's a constant, relentless grind, unlike anything prior generations of beekeepers have experienced. And that's the new normal.
Thank you. Randy, do you, in your experiences, what are your chances of confronting a healthy hive as Elina has described?
Well, can I first back up to something to add to what Elina said? Something about the honeybee that you should be aware of is it's a tropical insect, similar to human beings, which are tropical animals. And it is adapted for living in temperate climates, similar to the way that human beings have adapted for living in temperate climates. And it did that by living in a heated cavity and harvesting food during the spring and summer and storing it for the winter the same way we do. The honeybee is the only insect that maintains a warm body temperature throughout the winter. And they do that by storing honey as fuel and metabolically generating heat during the winter, maintaining a body temperature in the center of the colony, usually around 93, 94 degrees in the center of the colony. Even if it's 60 degrees below zero, they'll maintain close to that temperature. So the honeybee colony is in a constant race against starvation. In a typical year, a honeybee colony only gains weight maybe 5 or 6 weeks out of the entire year. Every other week they are losing weight, burning through their stored food. And we'll get to that later, I'm sure, with the problem what's happening with forage for honeybees and other wildlife these days. So the fascinating thing is that the honeybees are in this constant race between trying to store enough food in a very short period to make it through the rest of the year. The other thing is there's a tremendous natural selection pressure against honeybees. The honeybee population will double at least every spring through the process of swarming. So in a natural population, every spring it'll double the population. Now in a stable population, you're going to go back to the original population, which means 50% of the colonies are going to die every year, just normally. Under ideal conditions, 50% of the colonies will die in a stable population. That's selective pressure. The more fit, the more adapted will survive, the less clone. Now that brings you back to your question. In my operation right now, as we're going through our colonies, I'd say 95, 98% of them are in very good health. But at this point in time, there's a lot of food coming in, and the colonies are very robust. Their health will start to decline later on in the season. Back in the days before Varroa, before the changes in agriculture, weak colonies could still survive, and we could get by with a 10% winter loss. That's because the weak colonies, with just a little bit of help, would still manage to survive. Nowadays, the added insults of two parasites, mainly Varroa and Nosema ceranae, knocks a lot of those off. So there's a much heavier culling process. Prior to Varroa and going to almonds, when we got our, as John says, your peak count in April or June, we would still cull our colonies heavily in the fall and eliminate all the weak ones, just combine them with medium strength colonies in order to have strong colonies for almond pollination. And we assumed we were going to get a 30% loss back then, but we always had contracts for extra strong colonies, and we got a premium for that. Beekeepers who are used to being able to go to almond contracts with colonies of lesser strength could get by with much lower winter losses. The almond industry has demanded stronger colonies going in to pollinate the almonds. So part of the higher winter loss that we're seeing is our need to produce stronger colonies, and the really little tiny ones that would still survive but wouldn't be strong colonies are now counted as dead outs. So there's a number of factors that increases these losses. And as John said, it's just much harder to keep bees alive nowadays. It takes a lot more labor in an operation to, we've gone from, the standard used to be like one colony, one man could handle 1,000 colonies in an operation. Most operations I'm hearing of now, you're talking maybe 400 to 500 colonies per man. What do you run, John?
Poorly.
It takes like, you start stretching now, keeping half the number of colonies alive that a single employee could do before.
Thank you, Randy. It seems that we've come to the big issue, and the big issue, and I'd really be interested, I know the audience would be too, in your individual perspectives, is if we were discussing the state of the nation, and the state of the nation for the honeybee, how's it going for the honeybee and the native pollinators in your assessment?
Okay. There's 7 billion humans on Earth, heading for 20 billion humans. And it's a zero-sum game, which means that other species all suffer as the human population increases. And those that suggest that we can live in harmony with nature are fooling themselves. There's no harmony with nature with 7 billion human beings hungry for food and fiber. So, and we're seeing that. We're seeing a huge decline in wildlife populations across the globe. Honeybees are kind of a canary in the coal mine because people are aware of them. They don't pay as much attention to the native pollinators. We're seeing that with the monarchs right now. There's going to be the next hot topic after people tire of the honeybee. And, and we're going to be save the monarchs pretty soon. It's rough out there for many species to survive in competition with humans.
Would it be fair to say that you see a primary issue is the carrying capacity, the population pressure of humans and the carrying capacity of...
Well, there's only so many acres of biologically productive land on this planet, and humans have usurped them for their own use. And when we plant a monoculture, we favor one particular species of crop over anything else, and any other species that has the audacity to take a bite out of that crop, we call it pest and we kill them.
We're waiting with bated breath.
I mean, I tend to agree with Randy that bees and other animals are not doing so great. Yes, we are sort of to blame, right? But we're here. I guess we're here to stay, and we're hoping that we'll be able to actually have other species stay with us. It's good that we are at least becoming more and more aware of these issues, and we are, as a population, trying to do something good, I hope, to conserve the other species as well. But as Randy was saying, we need to eat, right? We're going to fight to eat, so what's going to happen with that, I don't know. And I hate to bring it up, but I was looking at Randy's slides that he sent before the panel, and he touched on the topic of genetically modified organisms. So I do tend to agree with the statement that he had on there. We're here, we need to eat, and if we're not to expand the acreage of agricultural crops, then genetically modified organisms might be one solution for it too. So there you go, some controversy.
We thrive. John, back to the State of the Union address for bees. What would be your assessment in 2015?
The State of the Union of honeybees is that honeybees are real good at drawing attention to themselves lately because we love to look at crises as Americans. And we have lots of attention, but the industry, the state of the industry is such that we have thus far failed to leverage that attention into effective bee research. It's comically underfunded that Apple, a computer company, spends more on research in 1 hour than all the combined bee research in America in an entire year. And I have trouble understanding that thought. We've never, the State of the Union, the state of the globe is we've never been more affluent, we've never lived longer, we've never lived healthier. We've never had better and more diverse diets. We've never had better tools for dealing with disease, and we vote with our dollars for foods that we like. And a lot of those foods are insect pollinated and insect produced. And like Randy says, it's competitive out there. I think the state of the beekeeping industry is that we're beginning to turn a corner, and I think we're going to become more effective in the next couple of years at taking attention and leveraging it into some meaningful research.
That sounds a bit optimistic.
I am optimistic.
You're optimistic.
I am.
You have to.
Well, I'd like you to prioritize something, so obviously this is a very complex issue dealing with many, many causes. And in reading your research and other research, I was wondering if it's possible to prioritize the significant causes of colony collapse disorder, and I'm only bringing three, I'm sure you can think of many others. And one would be the commercial migration for pollination processes. One would be the use of pesticides in our agricultural practices. Another would be the loss of sustaining habitat for the honeybee. And again, I'm a liberal arts major who struggled through college biology and chemistry. So that was my extent, but I'm sure you are well versed in many other issues. But if you were to prioritize issues that are creating a disruptive perspective in terms of the bees, where would you put your priorities?
Well, let me first straighten something out here. The public is aware of colony collapse disorder, which actually was a specific phenomenon which mainly happened between the years of about 2003 and about 2009. We don't see much with a sudden depopulation. Now we're seeing elevated rates of mortality, a higher winter loss and summer loss rates. But what the public's not aware of is back when we got the tracheal mite in the late 80s, California lost 70% of their hives. Okay, I was pretty much wiped out. When Varroa first came in the early 90s, mid-90s, I lost like 97% of my colonies. When the first miticides started to fail, the ones that controlled Varroa, again, there was massive losses of bees, and then I got hit by CCD, and again, huge losses. So this massive losses and recovery, that's part of the bee system, the system in nature and the system in the bee business. Beekeepers get hit really hard, and then either give it up or get back on the horse. And so the public just happened to catch attention on this knockdown. And a lot of organizations are kind of using the honeybee as their poster child for fundraising, and very effectively, much better than the beekeepers are using it. All that money they're getting is not helping the bee industry in general. So I don't want to beg the question. This is the first time we've had big losses in honeybees. That's not unusual. It's more the sustained kind of death by 1,000 cuts, which is making it harder. There's an evolutionary process happening right now. Every time you introduce a new parasite or pathogen to a naive host population, you simply get tremendous losses. When we got the tracheal mite, and had the 70% losses, what it does is it eliminates those susceptible organisms, and the few that are adapted to, or can adapt, then repopulate. And within 5 years, tracheal mite was just not that big a deal. It's hard to find tracheal mite in bees these days. It's out there, but we don't consider it a pest. We don't treat for it or anything. The same thing happened when we got chalkweed for the first time. We're seeing American foul, another big disease, kind of disappearing. Nosema cermani just knocked the snot out of us in the early 2000s, and it seems to be tapering off. And when Varroa first came, after I had successfully bred bees to be resistant to one thing after the next after the other, I said, Varroa's not going to be a big deal. Famous last words. Varroa, this mite that came from another bee species, the Asian honeybee, is about the size of the head of a pin. It's relative to bee, it's a monstrous parasite. I think it's maybe the largest parasite relative to its host size of any parasite. And the honeybee just got caught flat-footed. It did not rebound back. And despite really serious efforts at breeding for bees that can handle it, it's been a really tough thing. That's clearly the long-term solution. I don't think any beekeeper or researcher is going to dispute that the long-term goal is to have bees that are naturally resistant to the varroa mite, like its natural host is. But we're having one heck of a time reaching that goal.
When you confront the sustainability of the problem, do you have a priority of maybe a major cause or one that you would like to?
Okay, back to your original question. It would depend upon what area of the country you are in. Where I live up in Nevada County, pesticides are not a major issue, yet we still have many of the same problems. And I've spoken to beekeepers from all over the world. I get lots of visitors. And a number of them are also in totally organic pesticide-free areas, and they still have many of the same problems. So one cannot blame the problem on pesticides. Now, that said, there's a lot of areas in the United States where pesticides are a major problem. It's hard to keep bees alive and hard for anything to survive in monocultures that are sprayed to kill insects on a regular basis. So it's a local, so you're ordering, you're ranking of parasites, varroa mite mainly, of forage, and of pesticides would the ranking be different in which area you're in. But I think we'd all agree that probably the first three is varroa, and varroa is our major problem.
Elena, do you have a different perspective on this, or?
No, I mean, I think this is very widely accepted among the beekeepers and bee researchers, the bee community in general. Literally, the varroa is a big issue, and I want to follow up on what Randy said. It's a huge parasite. I think Randy has a photo, don't you?
We'll try to get one up.
Yeah, maybe get one up so you can
I
see the
believe it's
little
slide
monster.
23, but I could.
But I think there we go, yeah.
Slightly larger than life size.
But I think they say the comparison is it's like you having a size of a parasite the size of a dinner plate on you at all times, feeding on your blood. So it's pretty traumatic for the bee, and it feeds both on adults and the brood. And not only that, it actually lowers the immune response of the bees. It actually transmits various viruses among the bees, between the bees. So it's really nothing to laugh at. It's a serious problem, and of course, along with that, we have issues with not being able to actually get rid of it very easily because it develops resistance to various pesticides quickly. And I'm sure, if you have thousands and thousands of colonies, you often do rely on that, and that's just the reality of the situation. You have to use that as well. There are other ways to control it, but I think one of the big things that Randy also brought up was forage, availability of good food for bees, availability of consistent food sources for the bees. Just like you and me, bees need good food, they need protein, they need energy, but if you don't have that, then you're less likely to be able to fight off whatever might be attacking you, diseases, pests, whatever else is out there, even pesticides. They've actually done studies where they've shown that bees that are fed on good pollen sources, good pollen, that they get good protein, are better able to withstand pesticide exposure. So I think forage and nutrition is a really big, important thing that we need to take into consideration and work towards improving it somehow.
So far we have mites and habitat. Is that accurate? John, can you add to this perspective? You were going to prioritize issues?
Sure, thank you. Globally, not just America, but globally, all temperate zones are threatened where anywhere European honeybees are kept. Globally, the European honeybee is the champion of honey production and pollination. She is without peer. Globally, the varroa mite has also devastated European honeybee populations, and it is a global issue. And I wanted to talk about forage a little bit because healthy bees are a lot like healthy humans. Are there college graduates in college graduates? Okay. I know that a certain percentage of you guys made it through college on a diet of top ramen and Bud Light.
Just the third.
but I also know that's not a recipe for a long and productive life, which most of you have now figured out. A diverse diet for a human is also beneficial for a honeybee, for any organism really. And as we have embarked on this project to pave America with corn and soybeans, the diversity of available forage for bees has just gone off a cliff. And a short number, a large number, depending on how you look at it, I think it's a big number. In the Dakotas in the 80s, you could randomly kick beehives off the side of the truck and they would make 120 pounds of surplus honey every year, year after year, with regularity. It was idiot-proof. Even I could do it. The past 2 years in North Dakota, we've harvested crops that were below 60 pounds or less than half of what they were, and we're doing better beekeeping than we were in the 80s, but we're in a much more complicated environment with a lot less diverse forage and a lot fewer opportunities for bees to thrive. And this business has been turned on its head. What used to, the pillar of beekeeping used to be honey production. And the pillar of beekeeping is now gatekeepers of the food supply. That's my job. My job is not producing honey. My job is gatekeeping the food supply for my audience.
Thank you. At this stage, I'd like to acknowledge a Foster High School student. Her name is Brent Hayden. Does she happen to be in attendance? Is Brent with us? Brent's mom was a teacher here at Foster High. Brent, along with other students in Mr. Thomas Schroeder's biology class, read Beekeeper's Lament and submitted a series of questions to me via email. Brent expresses a concern for widespread pesticide use, but also wants to know, I think this is her specific question for you, if the African bee will become more popular for beekeeping than the European honeybee.
No.
It depends on where you live. Okay, so I was recently down in Veracruz, Mexico, speaking to beekeepers there, and they're divided about half and half. Because if you look at the European honeybee, which is a gentle, manageable bee, it's hard to keep that bee alive. If you're willing to keep the Africanized honeybee, which is much more difficult to handle, beekeeping is pretty easy. So that's the choice they have down there. And some beekeepers have chosen to keep the Africanized bee. In many of the Central and South American countries now, beekeepers have embraced the Africanized bee. Just because the European bee does not do very well up down there. Now, having been around Africanized bees, there's no way in the world I'd want to be a beekeeper with Africanized bees. They're a wonderful, strong, healthy bee, but man, it is no fun at all. There's when you would have to wear a bee suit and you have that noise of upset bees trying to sting you and drive you away constantly, and you're a bee lover, it's just like it chills your heart. So there's no joy in that for me. I wouldn't enjoy it myself. It's just simply business then.
Your son might describe it as a different experience.
A very different experience.
Well, special thanks to Mr. Schroeder and tying this into the book. Elina, would you mind taking a few minutes to describe the research being conducted at the Laidlaw Junior Honeybee Research Facility, UC Davis? And I believe you have some slides you might be willing to share.
We do have some slides, and as I said, we're a brand new lab, really. I've been in California for 8 months now, so I'm stealing this opportunity to sort of introduce us, so you know that we're there, we're on your radar. But this is the lab.
It used to rain in California. I don't know if
I know. It's funny because I came here for my first interview. It was December. It was freezing, and I was so excited coming from Pennsylvania. I was like, I'm going to enjoy the beautiful weather. I guess it was nice. It was 55, and it was 20 degrees in Pennsylvania, so it was nicer. But then in April, for my second interview, it poured last year, so that was lucky. Not this year, though, but hopefully we'll get some rain. And look at that. We did have some rain. If you look at the truck on the bottom, that was from 2 days ago. This is who I employ. They got it stuck, but they got it out, so that's good. So Billy and Bernardo are my 2 technicians in the lab. They're also facility and hive managers. And Bernardo is my husband. I've gotten questions, are you related? Yes, I'm related. Cameron is my only PhD student for now, although we are getting another student in the fall. We have a lot of undergraduates who are really eager to help, and they actually come free. They want to learn about bees, so we don't have to pay them, but that's our little secret, don't tell them. And then we have Stephanie, who's a visiting MS student from the Netherlands, actually. And this is basically the lab mission of the lab. It's pretty simple. We're here to support the California stakeholders, beekeepers, big and small, through both research and extension. So if you have any questions for us, let us know. And if I don't know the answer, I certainly know how to get a hold of Eric Mustin, who was my predecessor, and I can ask questions and let you know what we think. So, as I said before, mating and reproduction is really my forte. And this is just sort of a slide. You would think this took me, a couple of months to work through all of this. It actually took years to come up with this one slide. But this is my research. We're tracking and we're trying to figure out what are the factors that are causing post-mating changes in queens. And as you probably all know here, and after reading the book at least, the queens emerge as virgin queens. They end up mating with about 12 to 14 drones, sometimes more, of course. They're mated queens at this point, and then there are progressive changes that happen. So what we're really interested in understanding is what are the factors, namely drone-contributed factors, that are causing these changes. So we ended up looking at the effects on the queen, and we saw some long-term effects even after queen begins egg laying, depending on how well she was mated. Now, we did cheat here, and we used instrumental insemination. As I said before, you can't force the mating of the honeybee. So we used instrumental insemination, and we figured out that the process of instrumental insemination, where we use anesthesia, carbon dioxide, to anesthetize the bee to inseminate her, is regulating the behavior. So it actually suppresses her mating attempts. And it also drives ovary activation, or activates ovary activation. Seminal volume is driving that ovary activation a little bit further, and it plays a role in modulating her pheromone profiles. We talk often about how queens are egg-laying machines. They really are pheromone-producing machines as well. And it's really important for the queen to tell that to the colony, that she's there, she's egg-laying, she's a good queen. And believe it or not, they can actually send very specific information about how well these queens are mated. And then seminal fluid proteins are driving gene expression changes and also pheromones. All of this to say that, okay, queen is affected by what happens in the colony. It actually it translates into effects on workers. So it affects the worker behavior. And if the queen is not well mated, she doesn't produce that good pheromone, the workers can actually try and replace her, which is not so great, because you don't want a colony that's now without a queen if you're not checking your hives very often. If you have thousands of them, that's not often the reality. So you want those good, well-mated queens. It also affects the worker physiology. And really at the end, that's all really important to understand what's going on, because it can affect the colony health and productivity. And we want to have a good, healthy, productive colony, not just for honey production, but also, of course, for pollination. And these are just some of the projects that we're planning on doing. Also, they're more applied, so they're not necessarily related to mating, although we are looking at the effects on queen health and also worker longevity. And I did get some funding from the California State Beekeepers Association to look at synergistic effects of several pesticides, and we're hoping to inform management practices for the beekeepers, because that's what they really need, the applied research. Try the next one. And I just wanted to point out a couple of more things. I'm not the only researcher at UC Davis or the Laidlaw facility who does work with honeybees. This is Neil Williams, who's working on pollination ecology. He's really involved with figuring out the forage and forage that you can plant within for example, almond orchards to provide better forage for bees. Then we have Brian Johnson. He's interested in honeybee evolution and evolution of various traits. And then the last person that we have at that facility is Robin Thorpe, and there he is. He's been retired actually for the past 20 years, but he comes to work every day, even on the weekends. And he's just recently published 2 books, and he's working on a 3rd one. And then I don't know if there's another. I want to stop talking now.
Well, is there a center where the public can visit?
So if you
go through the
scroll down a few slides, if you can, there you go. So we don't encourage the visitation of the Laidlaw facility just because it is a research facility, and we're trying to avoid people just sort of coming in, and if anybody is doing there are a lot of people doing research, so we're trying to avoid that, and it's just a building. There's really not much to see there. But we do have the Haagen-Dazs Honey Bee Cave, and it's a beautiful garden funded by Haagen-Dazs. We don't have any ice cream, unfortunately. I'm sorry, I always get that question. But we do have lots of plants, lots of beautiful plants. Chris Casey is the manager and the director of the garden, and she has done a really good job of showcasing the plants that are really good for California drought, basically, and they're of course attractive to native pollinators.
So on the campus, if we know where the football stadium is, where would we find this center?
That's great, because I have no idea where the football stadium is. But you know what? It's on Bee Biology Road. So if you Google Bee Biology Road,
That's a hint.
you will find the facility.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Randy, you have a fascinating blog and a webpage, and you do not lack for commitment and opinion. Scientific beekeeping is fascinating to read. And it addresses many issues that we're talking about tonight. One of them is the decision regarding neonicotinoids and based on scientific research rather than political hyperbole. And I think this might be a topic that you can really relate to in terms of, you feel like we're making political decisions but not necessarily scientific decisions regarding beekeeping.
Absolutely. I was having lunch with the chief risk assessor for EPA recently, and he was very frustrated by this. And he said, Randy, we're being forced here. The EPA wants to make their research decisions based upon evidence, on scientific research. And he says, we're getting such incredible political pressure from Washington that we're going to have to make decisions based upon appeasing the public rather than upon sound science. And to the EPA, that's very frustrating. The neonicotinoids were developed to be reduced risk insecticides, to eliminate a lot of the poisonings of farm workers, applicators, and the toxic effects to the public, to be able to phase out the organochlorines, the organophosphates, the carbamates, all of which are serious issues for human and wildlife health. That said, insecticide means something that kills insects. So any insecticide is going to kill insects. And since bees are insects, we're concerned about any insecticides. There's nothing perfect about any of these. The advantage of the neonicotinoids, one of them is, along with a number of other insecticides, they go systemic in the plant. When you spray an insecticide, say an aerial spraying or a tractor spraying over a field, 99.9% of that insecticide never touches the target insect. It kills other things. It falls in the soil, it goes into the air, it drifts to neighborhoods, it goes into our water, poisons fish. That's tremendously wasteful from all those toxins. The concept of the neonicotinoids is that if you place them on the seed of a plant prior to planting them, that you would bury that seed and nothing else would be exposed to it. As the plant grew, it would absorb those neonicotinoids through the roots, spread them to the tissues of the plant, and the plant then would be toxic only to an insect that ate it. If it wasn't eating it, it wouldn't be toxic. And then the point was that if that plant is a flowering plant that would be attractive to pollinators, that you want it so that the neonicotinoid was diluted by the time the plant actually flowered, so it would not be toxic to pollinators. And under ideal circumstances, that happens. The problem is there are problems. There's problems with corn seed. Corn seed is an irregular shaped seed, and when it is seeded with the pneumatic seeders, unlike the old seeders that just drop them in by gravity, the airflow which breaks off some of the talc lubricant and some of the neonic, and it can cause dust. And under dry conditions, it can cause a drift issue and can be very harmful to bee colonies. Generally, the colonies will recover, but if you're in the business of keeping bees alive, recovery and staying in business are different things because you're expecting the bees to do better. So that's an issue that there's a lot of pressure on right now. The seed industry is working very closely, trying to develop ways to make that safer. The other thing is that a registrant, it costs like $50 million to bring a pesticide to market. You patent a formulation, and then you have 15 years on that patent. It typically takes 7 years to get it to market, which means you have 8 years left to recoup your investment and get a return on to the shareholders. And what I find is, speaking to the pesticide industry, the ecotoxicologists and the chemists at the bottom are really great people. They really want to do the right thing. They have families. They want to develop products that are safe for the environment, safe for their families. And as you work up the corporate ladder, you get to the point where the top people have one interest, and that is return to the shareholders. They want to sell product for those 8 years until you get off patent. So what they want to do is they want to get as many possible markets as possible for that pesticide. And this is where we start getting into problems now, that when you get away from the ideal use of a neonic on a seed treatment, you start spraying it over a plant or using it in other methods, you start having other problems. And we're seeing this. So now what it is, this EPA, just like when FDA approves a medicine, it goes through a certain amount of testing, but then when it's released to the public, the assumption is that you're going to look for adverse effects. And I don't watch television, but my wife does. And when I walk by and I see some of these commercials of medicines that you want to tell your doctor you want to take, and they say, may have these side effects, I just about have a heart attack hearing about all these side effects. How in the world would anybody ever ask their doctor to give them this medicine with all these side effects? Well, it's the same exact thing with pesticides. The EPA will register a pesticide, and then they wait for adverse effects reports back to see if they need to restrict it. The EPA has come to the National Beekeepers Association meetings for the last several years, and they have begged and pleaded with us to file adverse effects reports as beekeepers when we have problems, and then they can restrict the use of those pesticides. The problem is the system is not user-friendly for filing adverse effects reports, and the beekeepers, it costs like $300 to $400 to get if you are able to collect a sample in time of the dead bees or the pollen in your hive, and then send it off and pay the $300 or $400, you may find something out. The ag commissioners in many counties really favor the growers, and they don't want to go to the trouble of helping beekeepers out on these adverse effect reports. So many beekeepers have been soured on the experience of filing adverse effect reports. In 2010, there had only been one adverse effect report filed in the United States against clothianida, which is the #1 neonic seed treatment. And that report was filed by yours truly. Okay? No other person in the entire country had filed a single adverse effects report. That's still happening right now. The EPA is very frustrated because what they're hearing is that beekeepers complaining, many of them legitimately with problems with insecticides, but the EPA is powerless to do any changes in the regulation if there's not evidence to show that they're causing adverse effects, because the registrant has lots of high-paid attorneys that will make sure if you don't have evidence that you can't restrict that use. So the beekeepers have themselves to blame. And not that the system could be improved along that line. So in answer to your question, I have yet to see compelling evidence or even suggestive evidence that the colony mortality rate is caused by the neonicotinoid insecticides. Now, there's plenty of evidence that insecticides in general are pretty rough on bees. There's plenty of adverse effects, but I think it detracts from the issue by trying to focus on one class of insecticides when pesticides as a whole are more of a problem. I get bee kills every spring in almond. Just had one recently. The one last year wasn't even from an insecticide. It was from an oil that was added to an herbicide that it was sprayed in the hives. And this year we had kills from fungicides being sprayed, not insecticides. So the kills I've experienced have nothing to do with insecticides. They have to do with pesticides, but not insecticides. So the pesticides in general are an issue to beekeepers. And I would rather see the public look at the entire spectrum rather than focusing on one thing. One of the problems is that with some of the activist groups, and they're well-intentioned to start with, but then they hire media-savvy people who know how to run campaigns. And that media-savvy person has one job, responsibility, and that is to raise money. And they want to win a campaign. They may not know anything about bee biology or pesticides like that, but they know a whole lot about running a really good media campaign, and they're really effective at doing it. And that to scientists, that's very frustrating. We want to see the environment be better, but we want to see it be based upon scientific research and actual facts. Is that a short answer?
Yeah, thank you. A well-reasoned one. Thank you very much. Bart and Steve are going to solicit your cards if you have one. And I'd like to turn this topic a little bit toward John. John, Hannah Norhouse's book describes an almost Herculean effort to keep your hives functioning and your business succeeding. As a matter of fact, I've read the book 3 times and I get more tired every time I read the book. Are there any elements in this Herculean story that you wish she had included?
No, I think she captured it. What I didn't realize at the time is Hannah doesn't have eyes. Her eyes have been replaced by digital cameras that do not blink. She sees everything. But to describe beekeeping as a Herculean effort, I think is a little frothy. We're just trying to practice good stewardship and good husbandry. And to do so requires, Randy knows this, and anyone who's ever tried to keep a hive alive knows that you must do what you should do when you should do it, rather than when it's convenient. And sometimes it's not convenient to go out and work in the rain, yet you do.
So, but do you feel that there's anything in the book that should have been included from your experiences? Are you happy with the book?
Yeah, I think the book is an accurate portrayal. There's always, in any beekeeping operation, there's someone in the office at night who's reading and thinking and dwelling on how can we do this better. And in my organization, I've got 2 really good thinkers that are pondering and probing and asking and questioning everything. And we might have spent a little more time with that, but I don't know how you capture that in a 6,000-word chapter that had any interest to people. You know, everybody has to retire and ponder their practices, visit their business model.
Well, thank you. And that's very encouraging to think about the discussion that will be held next week. Next week, right? I stand corrected. So where are Bart and Steve? Do they go get hamburgers?
I can concur with what Randy says. I've read more bee books late in my career than I ever read on the front end of my career. And I consult the standards. ABC XYZ of beekeeping is still as relevant as it was 100 years ago. I don't know when it was first published, but my version is 1945, and there are portions of that book that are pretty well worn. Truth is eternal.
While we're getting our questions together, I'd like to throw out an idea to you. I've been reading a lot about bees, and I read a recent article that you may be familiar with, me not, and that's fine. It was written by Josh Dezarwa, and it's in Virgo magazine. And he's a writer for Newsweek and MIT, and there were some statistics and phrases that came out. And I also did some other research. And just to get your gut level reaction to some of these quotes that I'll read off to you, if that works for you. This is Maria Spivak, who's an entomologist at the University of Minnesota. Marla, excuse me. And she says, suppose you have the flu and you're starving and you have to walk 2 miles for food and there's a tick the size of a rabbit batting onto your neck. And when you finally reach food, you find it slightly poisonous. Well, then the flu finishes you off. Bees can contend with 1 or 2 of the 3 Ps, and those 3 Ps are pesticides, poor nutrition, and pest. But when all 3 combine, it becomes too much of an illness. An illness deals the final blow. Sick bees leave the hive to die, a phenomenon called altruistic self-removal. This may explain the mass vanishing characteristic of the colony collapse disorder. Is there a reaction to that quote, or do you agree with it, or do you think it's alarmist? Or?
Oh, absolutely.
If you really want to watch an outstanding TED Talk, go to TED and pull up Marla Spivak, M-A-R-L-A-S-P-I-V-A-K, MacArthur Genius Award winner and recognized around the world. And she nails it. Yeah.
She follows up with a quote. She says, bees aren't the canary. They're a mirror telling us our agricultural system is out of whack. We need to let the throttle up a bit.
Yeah, what's happened is we've reached a level of efficiency in agriculture that is astounding. Can you pull up some slides? I'm not sure where there's a cornfield planted there, just to show them what corn farm looks like nowadays. Back in the day, farmers stopped weeding corn when the corn reached knee high because the corn didn't shade out the weeds. And back in the day, go back a slide. Go back 2 slides. Okay, so this is typical corn habit. Forward 1 more slide. This is what a Midwestern cornfield looks like now. This is clear up into Canada. I've been all over the United States. That used to be prairie. In a few square feet, you used to have 50 square feet, 50 or more species of plants blooming with a wide diversity of animals, insects living on them, producing pollen and nectar throughout the season. Rich black soil. This is typical farmland soil now. You see 1 single species right there. This is efficient farming at its maximum. We've taken much of the livestock off of agricultural land, which means now you can remove fences. The fence rows, the remaining vegetation that grew on either side of the fence was the last vestige of natural habitat left in U.S. farmland. And that's where wildlife, and that's where the pollinators hung out, on the forage plants along the fence rows. When we remove the cattle and put them into concentrated animal feedlot operations and grow the feed for them and then haul it to them, you don't need fences anymore. So you don't have those strips of natural forage anymore. This is what you have. This is called no-till farming. Heavy the use on herbicides, especially Roundup, and zero weeds. No photon hits that soil, hits anything other than a corn plant. Well, corn might as well be asphalt as far as honeybees are concerned. There's no food in that. And with soybeans, which is the other major crop, in the states of Iowa and Illinois, 2 out of every 3 square feet of surface area are planted to either corn or soy. And it looks like this. I don't have the slides here. I was back in Ohio recently. I took a slide at a road junction that showed the 4 types of ground cover there. Type 1 is asphalt. Type 2 is close mowed turf with no flowers in it. There are 5 types. Type 3 is little tiny, more corn and then beans, soybeans, and then some little tiny patches of remaining woods where it's too steep or too rough to plow. Of those 5 types, the only one that supplies any kind of forage for wildlife or pollinators is the woodlots, where there's a little bit there. The other 4 types, the asphalt, the mowed turf, the corn and soybeans, supply virtually nothing. Soybeans possibly honey for a very short period of time, or nectar a couple of weeks out of the year. But for the rest of the year, none of those other types of ground covers supply any food whatsoever for pollinators. So we've reached the epitome of high efficiency farming, and as Marla says, it's time to back off. It's a non-sustainable method of farming. We're sucking the carbon out of the soil, we're lowering our water tables. It's time to give a little bit back to nature.
This leads us to a question from the audience, and that is, and I'll address this to all of you. How can I best utilize my couple of acres of meadow to provide forage for bees? How do I balance mowing for a defensible space regarding fires and also providing habitat for bees?
Now that's a very good question. On our property, we plant a forage mix in fall. In October, it used to rain, and it would set the seed, and then we'd have blossom from February through May. But it's been a little difficult to keep our forage going lately, and then we mow it because it does become a fire hazard. I've been collaborating with Pheasants Forever and Project A+M on seed mixes, and I've found them to be beautiful and robust and enrich the soil, and the deer come and live at my house and sleep on the deck, and it's just been really fulfilling to see these forage projects actually work, because I can't sit here and bellyache about no forage, and not do anything about it myself. So my experience with Pheasants Forever and Project A+M seed mixes has been beautiful. It's just been great.
So there's this balance that a person has to make a judgment in terms of fire protection and also habitat.
And stewardship of your land and husbandry of your property involves making some decisions that involve defensible space, but during other times of the year when fire hazard is low, you have this super abundance of forage for the monarchs and for the natives and the managed pollinators.
Yeah, and the timing, if you mow after things bloom, like typically in California, things all go dry. Well, by the time it's dry, there's no more food. So anyways, you feel free to mow it once it's gone dry. Also, if you manage a property with regular mowing, anything that requires to get to height to set seed will soon go extinct on that property. What's left are things that can handle mowing. Ideally, you have a diversity of perennials and annuals, and you'd have, in California, in the foothills here, there's plenty of forage for the bees pretty much until the end of June. If you want to really help the bees, plant things that bloom after the end of June.
Do you have a suggestion for planting something after June?
Well, I don't have a list right now. Some of the ones are, asters are very good. The coyote bush, baccharis is good, not very, very attractive. Easiest thing to do is go to any local nursery, and anytime in late summer, just walk through the nursery, or just walk around, take a walk around your neighborhood, and see what the bees are on. If it's attractive bees, it'll be attractive bees in the nursery or in the neighborhood. Find out what it is and bring that one home and plant it on your property.
I would assume rosemary might be one of those.
Rosemary is it, but it's a winter bloomer. It's a good one. It's a good winter bloomer. Completely deer-proof.
This is addressed to Elina. It's kind of an interesting question. What makes strong mating? What makes strong mating?
What makes a strong mating? I'm assuming probably what makes a good mating or a well-mated queen would probably is.
Sure.
I'm going to go with that.
Let's keep it to the bees, you know.
Yeah, keeping it with the bees. So we know now from work that was done by Tom Seeley, Dave Tarpey, Heather Madela, even in Australia, Ben Oldroyd. We know that the bees do better the more fathers they have in the hive. So the more drones the queen mates with, the hives seem to do better, they're more productive, they survive longer. So that's probably one of the things that you need to keep in mind. If you're doing, I hear people all the time now asking me about queen rearing, and they want to start their own breeding operations, and I always ask them, so where are your drone sources? Like, what do you mean, my neighbor has bees? Like, well, what if he's using those drones to trap the burrow mite and kills them, right? You have to provide them with good, healthy drone source as well. But that's definitely important to have bees that are, or queens that mate with lots of drones. And genetically diverse. Yes, actually, I was just reading an article about that, and apparently the vanished honeybee colonies If they're just the commercial queens in the colonies that are mated openly, they seem to be doing well when it comes to genetic diversity, which is really reassuring. I think the problem becomes when you're doing targeted breeding and you keep breeding within the same population, especially if you're using instrumental insemination, and you don't have any sort of admixture from the outside sources. But yeah, genetic diversity is really important. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
I think this question might border on some political discussion. Are most bees Democrats? No, I'm just kidding. Do honeybees work GMO crops in the same way they work non-GMO crops? In other words, do GMO crops have any effect on the health of bees?
I'll be short and then Randy can take over. Much as with neonicotinoids, I don't think there's really been any solid scientific evidence showing that GMO crops are affecting bees negatively. To move away from the honeybees, this year, I think not too long ago, there was a huge study that came out that was looking at the effects of GMO forage or GMO foods on livestock. And I mean, they've compared thousands and thousands and thousands of results from thousands of cattle, and they didn't really find any negative effect, and they have not found any negative effect on humans who are consuming livestock that is fed on GMO crops. So that's all I'm going to say.
Is there a consensus?
Yeah, that's actually it was a very good study going back. They looked at animal health records at slaughterhouses, where you see if there's negative effects, and they tracked it with the introduction of genetically modified crops. And if the problem is that genetic engineering is very poorly sold to the public. And the first couple of ones, the Roundup Ready and the BT crops that came out, both involved dealing with toxins in one way or another. And that was very unfortunate. If they first would have come out with something like the papaya, where they spliced in, used the natural process of how viruses get endogenized into host plants or animals to confer resistance to those. And the scientists simply took this virus that was wiping out the papayas and took a small piece of that virus and spliced it into the papaya, and came up with a papaya that then was resistant to that virus. And that's a very extremely natural process. It would have happened evolutionary anyway, but they were able to maintain, rather than waiting for it to happen randomly with a cultivar of papaya that may not have been very tasty, they did it to the desired cultivar. So now you have the papayas. There would be no biological reason to suspect that putting that little bit of a virus genome in there would have any effect at all, because it happens all the time with plants and animals also. About a third of your DNA is non-human, it's viral DNA coming from other sources. They're all genetically modified organisms. Everybody is. This is a process that happens all the time. Of all the foods that you might eat, the most thoroughly tested, any of them are genetically engineered because of tremendous pressure to test them carefully. And I've been over all the literature, and what I did is I read the anti-GMO books, and I watched the anti-GMO movies, and it scared the hell out of me. And I said, man, I gotta find out about this. I gotta get on the bandwagon and start fighting this GMO threat to our health. But I did something that most people don't do then. You go to all the citations in the back of the book, and then you download the original publication and see if they were interpreted right. And what I found was just absolute exaggeration and lying and stretching the truth and misinterpreting things. I was just dumbfounded that this was being sold to the public just out of pure fear. And the more I read, the less I found to be concerned about. Recent poll from Scientific American have found that 88% of scientists feel that genetically engineered crops are perfectly safe to eat. Now, these are the people scientists who are most objective of looking at these things and would be concerned about things, because scientists are really concerned about the environment, really concerned about climate change, really concerned about pesticides and that kind of stuff. And they're not concerned about genetically modified crops and human health or environmental health. And in the case of bees, the ones I've seen actually have had the BT crops where they're very carefully screened to make sure that the cry proteins in the BT crops do not bind to the proteins receptors in the gut of the bee. They're specifically designed not to harm the honeybee. And the research I've seen demonstrates that they do not do that. They also, at the same time, in some of the crops, have reduced pesticide use sixfold. So, big benefit to the honeybee there. Now, one of the indirect ill effects of one of the genetically modified crops is the Roundup Ready, which allows the farmers to use more herbicide. That has an indirect effect of killing more weeds. If you kill more weeds, then there's fewer weeds. But it's not due to toxicity.
Not a direct relationship.
It's not a direct, it's not just the genetic engineered crop is not affecting the bees, it's the lack of weeds that's affecting the bees.
We're going to have 3 more questions, and this one is a real straightforward one. What drought-resistant plants can you suggest that the general person might plant to provide food for the honeybee?
Well, I don't know, but I can tell you where to look it up. Actually, if you go to the honeybee, the Haagen-Dazs Honeybee Haven, they have a whole list of plants that they plant specifically to be drought-resistant and attractive to pollinators. There are also sources like Xerces Society, they have a list of plants. I'm sure Randy and John might think of others. TNC.
The Nature Conservancy.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I don't know if Project Apis Salmon also pheasants, if they have a list there, I mean.
I'd like to put a
pheasants
pitch
like
in
that.
Master Gardeners too.
Oh,
so,
yeah. There you go. So there are definitely a lot of resources online that have that information.
Well, shall we have a little controversy here? You ready for some controversy? What kind of beekeeper would you be if you didn't have almonds pollinating?
Broke. That's very easy. Yeah, the almond industry is carrying the bee industry in the United States of America. Our honey production has collapsed. Honey production in America has collapsed. That I cannot keep my doors open with a 48-pound honey crop, and that's exactly 43-pound honey crop, which is the lowest honey crop we have ever harvested in North Dakota. Without pollination income, I would close my doors.
Earlier you mentioned that you showed more than honey. I was speaking in Sweden a while ago, shortly after More Than Honey came out, and the Swedish beekeeper said, "Why in the world do you go to almond pollination?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Because they kill all your bees." I said, "What in the world makes you think that?" "Well, we just saw the film, More Than Honey." So I said, "Give me a minute." So I go in my computer and I pull up a slide of me helping the filmmaker for More Than Honey, who came and stayed with me for a month prior to filming it, with setting up some filming and faking the scene where the bee was sprayed by a pesticide that was done with a trigger spray bottle. While we were faking that scene, I did, in an orchard being pollinated by John Miller's bees, I did watch the sprayer come by with the fungicide. Completely engulfed John's hives with fungicide. But it certainly was no good for the bees, but didn't necessarily kill them. Yeah, without the almond industry, we'd be dead. Right now we make, with honey selling at well, okay, the average price for renting a hive for almonds now is somewhere around that $170, $180 rental fee, up from when I started at $8 a hive. So $180 per hive. Well, honey at $2 a pound, that's a 90-pound honey crop. John would be very happy with a 90-pound honey crop. He's making half of that. So essentially, almond pollination puts a California beekeeper in the black, just barely. And then you have to do something like more, like selling bees or making some honey to actually make a profit there.
But without, I want to read you a statistic. The USDA reported in 2012 that $656 million was paid in pollination fees, 45% from almonds. That's a very dramatic number. Well, this one's a little bit less controversial. It's, are there any Africanized bees in California? And if there are, where?
Sure.
What's their future?
African honeybees will travel as far as a truck will haul them. African honeybees may survive, may thrive, may be well established in Balboa Park, and may be established in areas where there's year-round bloom and year-round forage. The African honeybee is the grasshopper and the European honeybee is the ant. And they don't hoard, they don't save, and so when conditions get tough, they perish, they starve, which is why you don't see African honeybees in the temperate zones of Argentina or Europe or North America. It's kind of the big story. The African bee is a tropical bee and needs to be where there's constant bloom, constant nutrition to survive and thrive. So like Florida will probably be fully colonized eventually.
Pretty much anything 30 degrees latitude south is fully Africanized. Southern California is fully Africanized. Now, the thing is, and I've been down there in Southern California looking at those bees, and I have friends who keep nothing but Africanized bees in Orange County. They're not all red hot. So if you have an apiary, say 50 of them, maybe 2 or 3 might be red hot, and the rest, some of the Africanized bees you can just work in a t-shirt and shorts. But you wouldn't want to do that unless you're prepared very quickly to either run or change, because you hit a hot one. And I did. I went through a number of colonies one day without a veil or gloves or anything on, and then I got one that's a little hotter, and yeah, I put the veil on. But it's the unpredictability of them that's
It's the exception to the rule.
Yeah, they just go off.
Well, we have one more question. This response says, I understand bees get well fed at almond groves, but that could also be possibly a source in spreading varroa mites. Is there a danger in that journey and in that process?
One writer described the almond pollination event as a 400-mile-long bee yard from Bakersfield to the Gore Point of the Valley, and bees come from across the continent to the big dance, the almond pollination. And you've got beekeepers that are meticulous and professional and have great management practices, and you have others that are more more disposable and discretionary, and so you have this opportunity for good practices and bad practices to commingle across distances as short as from you to me, across from one orchard to another. So yeah, there's opportunity. We try to get around guys and orchardists that seek strong hives and good management practices, and we're lucky that way because we have been able to associate with some really top-flight bee outfits. That's not always the case. This almond pollination event is without parallel on Earth. There is nothing like it in the world. It's unique to California, and I find it thrilling every year to be part of that experience. But yeah, there's good beekeepers and there's bad beekeepers, sure.
One of the problems is back like when we got the trachea mite, it showed up in Florida, and we saw it coming for years, and we had plenty of notice, and you hear about it, that it's coming your way, and the beekeepers have a learning process. By the time it finally reaches you, you maybe be prepared for it. Nowadays, with beekeepers bringing bees from Florida and Pennsylvania to almond pollination and taking them back, anywhere in the United States, a new parasite shows up, or a new virus mutates, or any kind of pathogen shows up, it spreads through the entire United States in 1 year. So you don't have that slow progression of it. It just suddenly, it's right there. So that if we tried as beekeepers to create epidemics, we could not do a better job. Like we hired Elina to work for a year, say, how can we best create epidemics in bees? She couldn't come up with any method better than what we beekeepers do ourselves with the current agricultural system. And I'm not putting any judgment on that. I'm just saying that's just it. You know, it's like anybody who sends a kid to kindergarten. You do the same thing. If you want to expose your kid to every pathogen out there, send them to kindergarten. Okay, so it's not a good or bad thing. It just an is thing. Yeah,
that's true.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been quite an evening of insight and strong opinions and great expertise. We really appreciate you taking the time to help this community relate to what you're saying, and obviously the book will be a stimulus, and we'll thoroughly enjoy the book talk next week. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just finish off by saying that I've had a great time. I've learned a lot as well. But Marla Spivak came up, her name came up. She's actually going to be at UC Davis on May 9th giving a talk. It is the Bee Symposium. I do have a slide on it. I don't know if Greg can actually pull it up or not. So if you wanted to take, snap a photo of it. It's one of the, if you go towards the bottom, oh, no, it's right there, upcoming. Keeping Bees Healthy. Marla Spivak is the keynote speaker. Again, it's on May 9th, and the spaces are filling up quickly. It's only, I think, $75, which includes breakfast, lunch, and a tour of the garden at the end, together with a little reception. It's only $15 for the students. It's actually not even 20. It's 15 for the students, and that's elementary through college. So we hope that you will be able to make it, because Marla really is a great speaker, and we'll have other speakers as well. It's a whole day event, so we hope we'll be able to see you there. Thank you. Yes, if you want to hear me talk more. Thank you.
I just want to give a shout out to Gail Garbolino and Placer County Office of Education, One Book, One Community, and the guys who made it happen. My fellow gym rat down there, Ron Martin. Just a big thank you to those who volunteered their time, talent,